Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1035 of the Juicebox Podcast. I found myself wondering recently why it's such a human thing to compare stuff, compare things we have or things we want, or why we compare people. And why do we have to blame things? Like, why does something have to be at fault? These are kind of two disconnected, but in my mind, connected ideas. I wanted to talk more about them, so I brought Erika Forsyth in to have that conversation. If you get done and you're like, oh, Erika is delightful, I'm going to look into her services. You can check her out at erikaforsyth.com. While you're listening today, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you're looking for support with your diabetes, check out the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes. If you'd like to get 40% off of all your cozy items, go to cozyearth.com and use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout, and you will in fact save 40% off of your entire order. The podcast is sponsored today by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service and is 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. BetterHelp.com/juicebox. To get started, you just answer a few questions about your needs and preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. And when you use my link, you'll save 10% on your first month of therapy. You can message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. Talk to them however you feel comfortable. Text, chat, phone, or video call. If your therapist isn't the right fit, for any reason at all, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. And the best part for me is that with BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom picked for you. And you're going to get more scheduling flexibility and a more affordable price. BetterHelp.com/juicebox. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/juicebox. Erika, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Good.
How are you?
Friday,
today?
Super excited.
Friday,
Yep.
yes.
I just recorded with Jenny an hour ago, and I told her I'm going to get my toe looked at, and I'm going to be able to take a shower without a big plastic bag on my foot, so I'm super excited.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I don't even know.
I had a toe surgery, and I'm wearing this giant, I mean, it's a foot condom. I don't know another way to put it. But I have to wear it every time I get in the shower. And for the last 3 days, I'm like, this thing is healed. I definitely don't need to keep this off of water, but I told the guy I would till Friday. So I kept doing it. But anyway, tomorrow's shower is going to include my foot.
Going to feel so good. Yes.
So the people won't know, but we were supposed to start recording a series today. But instead of doing that, I kind of jammed in another idea first to get ahead of it. I am fascinated and want to know more about why people compare things and why they need to place blame on things. And I've been watching it for so long now. Running that Facebook group gives me a really good insight into people and how they react to things. And I just want to talk about it. So I don't know a lot about it at all. I just know what I see, but I'd love for you to explain it a little bit to me, please.
Sure. So I think it's interesting that you said, why do people compare things and blame things? And I would maybe insert that, why do people compare themselves or ourselves with one another or blame ourselves? But maybe I want to clarify, are you thinking about it in that perspective or things in general?
So I think yes. What do I want to say? Okay, so I guess let's start with a couple of examples. Why do I see so many conversations that want to say that type 1 diabetes is worse than having type 2 diabetes. That there's a clear example of that. It feels like at times there's a need to make sure people understand that I have the worst kind of diabetes. Why is that?
Oh, so I would say first and foremost, that might be how you were informed or educated when you were diagnosed. I think personally, 33 years ago when I was diagnosed, I remember that language that like the type 1 was the harder diagnosis to have and more life-threatening. And consequently, that is the harder one to manage. I think now I know we've talked about this before. Why do we do that now when we know that both are challenging? No one is really, quote, to blame. But I think we use, thinking about the comparison, the social comparison, there's actually a theory that we do this, humans do this naturally, sometimes to make ourselves feel better.
Okay.
Sometimes we do it without even knowing it and we make ourselves feel worse. But it's kind of like it's a natural human phenomenon that we are comparing ourselves to others, and it can be a positive, right? We can do that positively and make ourselves want to get better, feel better, do better, or we can do it and it'll make ourselves feel worse. Right. But I think the example about the type 1 versus type 2, I have the harder one. And in fact, just recently I was talking with somebody, is not in my practice, with a friend, and I shared with her I had type 1, and she said, "Oh, I have type 2. I know it's not as bad." She offered that up to me. I said, "Oh no, like they're both challenging and really hard to live with."
Yeah, I don't.
It was interesting.
That fascinates me. Like, what is the need right then and there to let? Because what is she doing? She's telling you, I'm not saying I have it as bad as you do, right? Like,
yes.
So that was meant kindly. Like, I know you have a thing that's worse than me. I'm not going to challenge you about it. But I don't understand why the brain goes to that right away. So I understand comparing listen, I did it earlier today. Earlier today, I pulled up the top 20 list of podcasts in the medicine category. And I was sitting at 13. Me, a guy who makes a podcast completely by himself. And I'm looking at 13 like corporations ahead of me, like big name people with like staffs and money and like, that kind of thing. And I should look at that and think, wow, look at that. I'm hanging. You know what I mean? And I do. But then the next thought is, how do I get there? How do I move up? But I'm not torturing myself about it. I actually think the podcast is good enough that it could reach enough people that we could like float up in that top 5 and 6, right? So that's a comparison that I use to motivate myself.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I'm not trying to make myself feel badly. I did not feel badly when it was over. I'm absolutely happy to be 13. It's amazing. You know what I mean? So I get that. I get even trying to get on a sports team and picking the person who's starting and you're not starting and saying, what is that person doing that I'm not doing? I think that's all very healthy, to be perfectly honest. I think that part of the reason the podcast works for people is because I've chosen to say, this is how we do it. Here's the success we have. I think you could do that too. Right. It's not I'm not thumbing my nose at people and going, ha ha ha, my kid's A1C is this, like, right. But there are people that do that. So I get that, I guess. Like, I understand, but what do I mean here? It's different mindsets that read it differently, right? So if I can do that thing and say, hey, listen, here's the way it works for us. I hope you can do it too. And there are plenty of people who come along and go, I love that. I love that it's hopeful. I love that it's giving an example. I'm going to strive for that. But there are also people who come and see that and go, why are you rubbing it in my face? Like that's their first thought. Like they think I'm comparing myself to them when I'm not. Like, so why do some people read it as hopeful and other people read it as like an FU?
I think it's challenging to,
Say why.
I'm hesitant to do big generalizations, but I think it goes back to maybe what is your concept of just in life around your sense of blame versus taking responsibility? Are you expecting perfection? And if you aren't perfect, where do you go in your mind? Are you blaming yourself and shaming yourself? Are you saying, oh, I messed up here. I can take some responsibility in that area, but I'm not perfect across the board. Understanding that we aren't perfect and we are human, and being kind and compassionate to yourself. I imagine maybe people who might look at, in your example, look at how to manage your type 1 well, and feel like you're rubbing it in their face. Are they then feeling like they're shameful and blaming themselves if they can't do it, as opposed to, oh, well, maybe I can learn, and I'm not quite there yet. I'm never going to achieve perfection, but I'm going to make mistakes and I'm okay.
So their life experience informs their response, whether they know it or not. So if you grew up with a parent who was always telling you you're not good enough, for example, or you failed a lot in your life, something like that, and then you see somebody doing what you consider to be better than you, I'm making air quotes,
yes,
then you look at that and say, well, I can't do this, or I don't need to be told that I'm not doing well enough. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So somewhere along the lines, you could have been, it is common if you've been exposed to various forms of abuse or neglect as a child, or did not have the proper encouragement and affirmation that you are good enough. Oftentimes someone's mindset is, I'm not good enough. I'm never going to be good enough. And no matter how hard I try, I'm always going to feel this way. Mm-hmm. And so it's easier. That's painful, but it's an automatic response when you see someone doing better than you, to say, well, they're flaunting it, and I'm never going to be able to achieve that. I'm never good enough. So they're kind of maybe stuck a little bit in that blame and shame mentality. It's painful.
Yeah. And that's really, to me, that's the sadness of it, is that somebody could feel like, I don't know how to put this. Your life, whatever your life is fantastic if you let it be. And by let it be, I mean, if you accept that this is who I am, or what I am, or where I am, or whatever, and that's terrific. If you think that's true, it is true. If you stop comparing yourself to things that are unattainable for you, right? Like it's different for me to say I have a fairly popular podcast and I think I could make it more popular. That's reasonable. But I couldn't look at Idris Elba and say to myself, I really need to look that handsome, and then I'm going to be okay. Because I look the way I look, and this is all I have. Like, right, I can't make a change to that. So that to me that's terrible, to think that there are people living what they think are unfulfilled lives, when really the only thing that needs to change is their definition of good or success or happy, or like, right? Like, is that the idea? Like, you can be happy anywhere if you're, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying like if I lived on the side of a mountain in Nepal and I didn't have a coat that I could be happy. I probably could not be. But like, like reasonably speaking, it's your own expectation that's crushing your ability to enjoy what you have, is how it feels to me. But I don't know if that's right or not.
Mm-hmm. And well, the expectation, the mindset, which is, developed over time and evolved over time through all of your family of origin, your life experiences. And I think thinking about, how kind are you to yourself? Have you learned that skill set to say, gosh, I really excelled in this area, and that's amazing, but I failed in this area. But you know what? That's part of human nature. Yeah. And we all fail, and we all suffer. We all have pain. And to not get stuck in that, the thought on repeat of, I'm never going to be good enough. But that's a hard thing for people to do, to
Sure.
just hold that thought of like, gosh, I failed in that. Whoops. Like,
Yeah.
that's part of, I'm going to be kind to myself and move on.
Right.
That piece is really hard to have, that awareness of the thought and then move on.
Right. Like, it's sort of the idea that I forget what the number is, but they say like every person who's achieved millionaire status has probably gone bankrupt a number of times on their way to it. Like that trying to give people the idea that like you can't get to it right away the first time. Like, and I do think that that's there's a saying around this that I just heard again recently. I'm not going to remember it, but that what you don't see about an overnight success is the 10 years of work that somebody put into it. Right. And so you see somebody pop up out of nowhere and you think, oh, I should be able to sing a song on TikTok and blah, blah, blah. You know, that this all should happen to me after that. But that's not the case. Like, that's not how it happened. You're seeing the one example of that of the person who actually made it all the way. And you can't make that happen. It just, you have to, like, I don't know, like in my mind, Erika, forget telling people what to do. I think life is short and that you should try to be happy, you know, and I get why you can't at times, but then if you're hitting one of those roadblocks, you should, in my opinion, you should focus on how to get around that roadblock instead of just running into it, starting over, running into it, starting over and over again. Like, think like, obviously what I'm trying to do is being blocked by another part of my psyche. Like I have to fix that thing or understand it or whatever so that I can keep moving on my journey and try to get to this place I'm trying to get. Because I think, and I don't know if I brought this up with you or not, but this is going to sound like a bummer for a second. I don't mean this as a bummer. The end of my mom's life taught me that a lot of being alive is setting goals, achieving goals, and resetting goals. And that once those carrots are gone off those sticks, it's kind of difficult to find a reason to get up in the morning. Does that make sense? Like once it all feels gone, like if I'm not going anywhere, what am I doing? And I don't know if that's kind of like the worker bee mentality that's born into like living things or not. But, you know, if you need something to do, and I don't know, and you can't always be focused. You can't just be focused out a mile. Some of it has to be now. You have to think about now, today, with a longer goal, I think, if that makes sense or not. I also don't know if there's a question there. So good luck talking now.
I think, well, the goal setting moving forward in life, that might be easier for some than others. For example, if you have a perfectionistic mindset or that you feel like you are in control of things, you could get stuck and not wanting to move forward or evolve or try new things. Because what if you fail? What if you don't get it right the first time? Then where does the blame go? It goes right back on yourself. You're going to say, well, gosh, I tried and I failed. I'm not going to try again because look what happens every time.
Well, then use that comparison thing and compare yourself to somebody doing worse than you, and you'll feel terrific. That's all.
Well, you know, they say, you know, that I think both, as we said in the beginning, you know, comparing quote up versus comparing down, that there's maybe a little bit that can be healthy or helpful, maybe is a better word, to a certain extent, but then it could also become a trap, right? Like we talk about the social media highlight reels. If you're constantly trying to find self-worth by looking at your friends or friends of friends, social media reels, and saying, well, I'm never going to be able to travel there or achieve that A1C or get invited to these parties. You're going to feel you're constantly comparing up and that you're never good enough and you're never going to achieve. Or you could say, gosh, look, they're doing these things and maybe somehow I can change a little bit in my life and get there. Or comparing down, which I know that it's controversially been saying that phrase of like comparing down, but say like, wow, look at that person's thing or house or dress. So I look way better.
So the value there by the way, psychology today believes there's value in that, or can be valuable in comparing down to give yourself a boost. But I guess then the concern would be, if I'm just going to try to paint a really ham-fisted picture, if I'm a homeless, drug-addicted person, and then there's a homeless person who's not drug-addicted, if I go, oh, well, I might be homeless, but at least I'm not using heroin, that is not going to propel you out of your situation. It could make you feel falsely comfortable in a situation you don't really want to be in. Is that fair?
That's fair. And I think to do it every now and again is fine. But again, going back to that, if that's your only source of finding self-worth or value by looking at other people's lives and saying, well, at least I'm not there, that then maybe is an inauthentic place of satisfaction.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So if it's a human instinct to compare ourselves, and you can get stuck in any number of these scenarios that we've painted, if you find yourself in that, how do you break free of it? Is there, I mean, if I came in the office and said this to you, like, what would you say to me?
Well, it would be more than a one session quick fix, but to be totally honest, I think we would first start in just practicing the awareness of how often do you find yourself comparing? Is it all day long? Are you scrolling, thinking about what you don't have or what you have, and trying to gain that sense of self-value or worth? So practicing the awareness around how frequently are you doing that? And then working through that. I think a lot of people say, well, if you just had higher self-esteem, there was a big push in the psychological, world, that we all need more self-esteem. And then more recently, in the last 10 years, it's been more about self-compassion. And so we would look at that. If you're feeling like you need more self-esteem already in that space, you're judging yourself for not having self-esteem.
Right.
And saying, gosh, I don't think well of myself. And you can get trapped in that. So we would then look at, how are you offering kindness to yourself in areas where you excel, in areas where you struggle. And oftentimes that's where we spend a lot of time, is looking at that self-compassion piece.
Am I off base by saying that it would be valuable to want what you have? Like, how do I mean this?
Well, having gratitude.
I think what I mean is, like, not looking at something and always thinking, yeah, well, this is what I've achieved, but I want that thing. Like, if you want what you have, you can be happy with what you have. If you're always wanting something you don't have, then you're always going to be dissatisfied with yourself. And then I could see where the self-esteem could spiral. And then, by the way, I see what you're saying about the falsely propping people up with the, like, you're terrific when you're not terrific, right? Like, why not just say, hey, you're really good? Like, why, because I don't see how that could work, because if you tell me something about myself that I know is not true, I'm not going to believe it in my mind. Like, it might feel nice, like, for a second, but, if somebody walks up to me and goes, oh my God, you're so tall, I'm going to go, thank you, and then walk around and go, I am not tall. Like, right? But if I wander around thinking I'm tall all the time, I think that's a disservice. Like, whereas I could just think, this is how tall I am. That's great. Like, who cares? I don't need to be taller than this. I don't know if that makes sense. But
so what I feel like what that is kind of practicing mindfulness and acceptance of the truth and of whatever your thought is. Being comfortable with having uncomfortable feelings, or not that you're saying you're uncomfortable about your height. But
oh, no,
really
I am. I want to be taller. Like, if you pin me down and go, hey, Scott, where are you at on your height? I'd say a couple more inches would be terrific. Like, but it's not ruining my life. Do you know what I mean? Right.
So you've accepted, okay, this is like a physical trait. You've accepted your height, and you're okay with that.
Right.
And so thinking about like a feeling, an emotion that maybe feels uncomfortable, when you are able to hold that uncomfortable feeling, you are then in turn telling your mind, your soul, your heart, your body, that you are okay just exactly as you are.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean then you're going to go stew in feeling sad or rejected because you didn't get the job or disappointed because your A1C is lower. You're just able to say, gosh, I'm feeling really frustrated, maybe even depressed. And I'm going to just hold this. I'm going to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Right.
And then it's moving on. But the minute we say, oh no, I can't feel that way. I can't accept how tall I am. I can't accept that I was rejected. Then we get stuck there.
Are there some people that want themselves or their situation to be not just comfortable for themselves or happy, or something they're happy with? They want it to be something that everyone would universally agree on. Like, you know what I mean? Like, which is a weird thing to me because some of the prettiest people are not classically pretty. Do you know what I mean? Like, and so why are you trying to look like a angular jawed blonde model from the 70s? If, first of all, that's not everybody's thought about. Well, I think that's what you think. Is that where they say like magazine covers need to be representative? It's, oh, I'm saying it now. Okay. Because otherwise, if we market over and over again, this is what pretty is, then that's the thing that I judge against. Okay. I'm starting to understand. But what you don't know is what's in most people's heads. And I'm going to make an incredibly weird comparison here for a second. Okay. It's going to make you uncomfortable. It's making me uncomfortable bringing it up, but it makes it makes the point really, really well. Go to any porn site, okay? And there are dozens of genres that people love, and they're not at all what you would think of as classically whatever. Like, do you know what I mean? Like there's a person out there for you, no matter who you are. And I don't think people believe that. Like, I understand, like, but I understand why that would be difficult to believe, but that's just the truth. I ask my wife sometimes, like, we did this game the other day, with, a bunch of famous people. I can't believe I'm going to tell you we did this. So we pulled up a list of like what we Googled most attractive, blah, blah, blah. And we went through and we were like, I don't really see it with that person. Or that. And what it shows you is that like my particular interest doesn't lend itself to the fifth person on the most attractive list. Like when my daughter said to me, when you think of a famous person who's really pretty, who do you think of? And I was like, Kate Winslet. And my daughter goes, really? And I'm like, yeah, no, Kate Winslet. And she's like, why? I'm like, I don't know. Like, that's who pops into my head. Or, some guys are looking for, I don't know, big butts. And some women are looking for really skinny, dorky looking guys. And like, why are we so trying to look like Linda Evangelista? Like, do you know what I mean? Like that, there's a name I just randomly picked out of my ass.
Yeah, that was
Thank you. I really just whipped that one out. But she's a person who, in my mind, is classically beautiful. Like, but I don't think she's particularly attractive. So, like, why are we always trying to be the thing if we know that's not true? Because we have those feelings too. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm walking around knowing that I don't find classically beautiful women to be perfect, but yet I want myself to be classically perfect. Because when Arden said, like, who do you want to look like if you could look like anybody? I was like, oh, George Clooney. Like, that's easy, right? And Arden goes, I don't think George Clooney's attractive. And I think
isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And I think this game you should all play this game with yourself. I think it would teach you a lot. And it passes a half an hour in the kitchen pretty nicely. So, but I that's my confusion. Like, why do I know that I don't think classic is classic? But yet when somebody asked me what I wanted to look like, I should have said me. And I said George Clooney. All right. I don't understand.
So, well, I think also let's acknowledge your brain is developed more so than, the teenage brain.
Sure.
And so when teenagers, young children are exposed over and over and over again, in our day, it was magazine covers, but now on social media, they are exposed to, and by advertising that this is beauty. So even if I hear what you're saying, that your sense and how you define beauty is different than your daughter's, or attractiveness or good lookingness. But yet we are trained to believe what beauty should look like. Yeah. And when you're younger, you absorb that. Mm-hmm. And so that's what leads oftentimes to destructive behaviors and destructive thinking. Because we don't look that way or own that thing or do that thing.
So to move it away from looks, and why do I see so many people comparing how they eat to how other people eat? And I don't just mean in the diabetes space. I mean, this is, if you want to start a fight in 2 seconds, it's catnip to say that the best way to eat is this. And then people will come in and compare and contrast, and you don't understand about protein, and you don't understand about fat, and you don't understand about carbs, and oh my God, and then I eat the best way. And what you're doing is wrong. These are like, this happens constantly. Like, why would I almost cursed. I'm going to curse. Why do I give a how anybody else eats? Like, I don't understand. Why does that matter? Hey guys, just jumping in to remind you that one of our sponsors, BetterHelp, is offering 10% off your first month of therapy when you use my link, betterhelp.com/juicebox. That's betterhelp.com/juicebox. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service. It is 100% online, boasts over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists, and you can talk to them however you want. Text, chat, phone, or on video. You can actually message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. BetterHelp.com/juicebox. Save 10% on your first month.
The first thing that comes to mind is it feels similar to religion, maybe, in how people have belief systems, they have value or maybe value systems, and when you discover your truth, and whether it's your religion or your value system or belief system, you want to share and, like, quote, proselytize to others. And so I wonder if it begins that way of like, wow, I discovered this way of eating and I feel so good and I've lost X amount of weight, or I feel I have so much energy, and you want to share, and maybe it's exciting. But then I know it quickly can evolve into criticism and really cruel type of commentary. Yeah. That I found the way and you haven't. I'm not. Do you find that people go there first, or it becomes like, oh, this is so exciting? Yeah.
So I get to watch a lot of conversations, and they are all going to go the exact same way. I could probably look at a post and take a magic marker and go, okay, this person brought up food today because they just found a great way and they want to they share it with somebody. You can tell in their tone, the wording right away. A similar post will come up from somebody who you're like, this person is here because they got just a little crazy in their head and they think it's their job to tell the whole world this thing. So those are the two different ways it comes from people. Entry points. The third entry point is when someone comes up and says, hey, I have a question. What do you think I should do? So there's either the person who's like going to change the world, there's the person who's just excited to talk, and there's the person who doesn't know and is looking for input from people. No matter how they start, they're always going to end the same way. Now, the one that starts with, let me tell you, that is met with resistance more quickly. So, but it's also met with more support. So the other let me tell you people will come in and start going, yeah. That guy knows. He knows. We're together. Solidarity. But then the people who feel like they A, don't want to be talked to like that, or B, have a different idea, they're going to attack back based on the way the first person came into the story. If that makes sense.
Yes.
And then that fight happens. Now, the person who comes in and says, hey, I've been doing this and it's really been working for me, they're going to be met by somebody who says, well, I do this and it works for me. Then someone's going to come in to defend the first person. Then someone's going to come in to defend the second person. And then it turns into the same goddamn conversation from the first post. And then the same thing happens if someone's just like, hey, I'm newly diagnosed and I was wondering. Here's an interesting one. My kid's getting sick and tired of cheese sticks and Jell-O. I need more free foods.
Mm-hmm.
That will be met by lovely parents who will come in and give other options for low carb snacks. But inside of 8 minutes, someone's going to come to tell them there's no such thing as a free food, which is true. They don't know that because they were just diagnosed, okay? But instead of just saying they don't mean free, they mean their understanding of free, and saying to them, hey, I know you're calling that a free food, but just heads up, you know, your kid might be honeymooning right now. You might be seeing a doctor who's over basiling you to cover for your snacking, like that kind of stuff. But there's pretty much carbs in almost everything. And even something, for example, like chicken that doesn't have carbs in it will be stored by your body as glucose later. And you'll see a rise from protein.
You later.
Right. You could say that. But instead what they say is there's no such thing as free foods, which is true, but not going to move the conversation along. So that's an interesting thing that people do too, is they'll come in and drop their truth bomb, but not add any context. Those people I always think are trying to stir shit. That's how it seems to me. Like that's kind of, actually, that's the phrase I use. I think they're shit stirring is what I think. Right? Like they want to say it.
Yes. Maybe intentionally, maybe unintentionally. But I also wonder if you have this experience of, you know, there is such a huge learning curve in type 1. And I went in the beginning, everything is so overwhelming and you don't know what's what. And then 1 year in, 5 years in, 10 years in, you start to learn more. And I wonder if you also have a sense of like, oh, I've learned this. I know this.
100%. Yeah.
I feel pretty good about myself, but we forget that how our tone is going to.
Yeah. The communication lets them down a lot. Yeah. Communication lets them down a lot. Listen, I was put in a unique situation where I had to talk to people online for years. And it becomes obvious that you're like, there is a way to speak to people that is not condescending and it is not fake, but it doesn't make anybody upset. You have to come from a real honest point of view. And I still have a point of view. People know that I'm not I'm not milquetoast, you know what I mean? But at the same time, there's a way to talk to people where you don't rile them up. And there's also a way to see that someone's already riled up beforehand. And then they start blaming each other. You're the reason that people with diabetes, it's people like you. It's statements like that. Like you're ruining the world. I figured out the right world and you're ruining it. And then there's this feeling, I'm always amazed by people on their social media or in these situations. They feel like they're talking to the whole world. I'm like, you're talking to 8 people. Just calm down. Like you're not changing a goddamn thing. You're arguing with 6 people. Stop it. You know, or somebody with 150 followers on Instagram is putting up something that they clearly took, I don't know, days to write. And it's beautiful and prose and everything. And it gets 3 clicks. And I'm like, no one saw that, you know, but they still are acting like they're having that impact. That drive, it seems unstable to me. I don't know another way to put it. So that feeling that I'm talking to you and you need to listen, like that feels like that person has something to work out that has nothing to do with this sometimes.
I think there are probably a variety of factors, but I think going back to having some semblance of control in feeling like you're in control of your life or of your kids' choices. We do that even though we know we're not in control. I mean, we're in control of some things, but in the larger picture, we're not really in control of everything. And perhaps that feeling of when life is feeling out of control, maybe you might speak in a certain way to say, no, this is the way it has to be done. This is the way it works for me. And this is the way you should do it. And maybe they lean into that sense of control when maybe other things are feeling more out of control.
Yeah. So I'm going to use this as an example. The other day online, I saw a person jump into a thread and stir. Like, it was clear that's what they were doing. And then I took a hard look and I thought, oh, I know this person. They've been in here a long time. That doesn't make sense to me. And I had to remove their comment because it was hurtful and nasty, and it was just going to lead to more hurtful and nasty. And I took it out, but I took the moment to send a note. And I said, hey, I don't know what's going on, but you can't do that. And you've been here a long time. This really surprised me. And I got a return note that said, I'm really sorry. I have 2 different family members in the hospital. One of them's out of state. I need to find a better way to relieve my stress here than to get online and do what I just did. And so my expectation is that most people are having some sort of a thing in their day when this happens. Like, I genuinely think people are like decent. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that anybody just in their best moment gets up and says, let me go argue with somebody about what we're eating, or let me go compare this to that, or go blame a whole group of people for whatever. I don't think that that's the case. I think that there are enough people in the world, and they have enough access to the internet, that it only takes a couple of people having a bad day to give you the impression that the world is a terrible place. And I just don't think that's true. You know, so I got a lot out of that response. And then I responded back and I said, hey, you know, I just lost my mom. I think I have some idea of what you're talking about. I know how hard it is. I'm sorry. Please just, keep visiting the group and feeling better. And if you feel like you need to lash out, like, I don't know, go do something else. Leave those people alone. But I was the only one that had that compassionate response, because when he started doing what he was doing, everybody else was like, boom, coming back at him, swinging with some people are like, here's the rules in the group, or here, you can't say that, or be nice, or why. And I'm like, oh my God, like, none of this is going to go well. Like, you don't see that. And then they'll start telling me like, he's wrong, not me. 'Cause I'll say, hey, be nice to him. And they'll be like, me, I'm not the problem. I'm like, oh, now you're both the problem. Like, everyone should have to moderate a group of 40,000 people for a week, because you'd start seeing the world in a completely different way. It's interesting. And my group is, and I think you can attest to this, really harmonious, and generally speaking, overall a pretty lovely place to be. But it's still, when it pops up, you're like, oh, here's all the stuff that we go to therapy for.
But yeah, I'm sure you see so many, patterns of human nature that we all can grow in, certain areas at certain times. I think one thing I just actually noticed in a post I read recently that I thought was really gracious and kind. I know we're like totally off topic kind of, but reading, I think oftentimes we insert ourselves, like you just said, without reading the initial post or reading the thread. And someone very graciously said, hey, I think you missed the first, like the actual question, maybe go back and read the initial post. And I thought that was a really kind reminder to, like, you wouldn't insert yourself in a conversation that was happening in the living room if you were in the kitchen without, I mean, maybe you would, but without understanding what was happening. What's the context?
I know what you're talking about, and I've seen it done both ways. I've seen it done like, hey, I think you missed like the tone of like you missed the question. But there's also people who didn't miss the question. They're just using it as an opportunity to give you their opinion. And so it's interesting. And I don't think everybody's going to listen to this and go, oh, I do that, I should do better. As a matter of fact, I don't know. I don't think it's going to help anybody. But I'm very cynical about this stuff, because I just, when we're talking about something that is built over time through experience, like through parenting or upbringing, even if it's being pointed out to you right now, what is your real like chance of like grabbing a hold of it and redirecting it? And my honest thought is, you have the best chance in a situation like this, where a person, me and you, who have no connection to their lives, like the people who are listening, can say, hey, if this is happening to you, this is how it sounds to other people. Like maybe you don't want to sound like this, because I don't think this is a thing you can tell a spouse or a child or a close, like, you know what I mean? Like, I bet you if your husband acts up and you say something to him, he's like, don't therapy me. And like, I'm not digging into your life, but I'm assuming that's happened. And then, like,
it's happened.
Yeah,
it's
okay.
happened. I'll admit.
Right. So you have a much greater chance of helping people you don't know who have no connection to you than you do of helping the people around you. Because all this insight that I have doesn't help me that much with my wife, because she's like, you're an idiot. I've known you forever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you knew something, like, you know what I mean? Like, she doesn't take me seriously the way other people would. And my point about that is that everyone's in that situation. This is your best opportunity to see yourself in some of these descriptions and say, I don't want to be like that. Like, to me, that's why I'm having the conversation. So there's a look behind me. That's why I'm having this conversation, because I think it could help people, but we'll see.
Yes, hopefully. And I think goes back to, having the awareness and then the desire to change, and taking it back to, why do we compare? I think with the example that we've been using in the Facebook group with food and eating styles, perhaps you obviously feel better about the way that you're eating, and maybe you find that self-worth, that you found the way, and you want to compare it to other people, and that you feel better than other people because you found the way that works for you. And I think the highlight, underline theme that I know you talk about a lot in your Facebook group and on the podcast is, do what works for you, and that's okay. There's no right or wrong method of eating. And if we could all live in that space, that would be a beautiful thing to remember. That's great if keto works for you, or if eating whatever you want works for you. And doesn't always have to be all or nothing.
Yeah. And it is more attractive to people psychologically to blame someone than it is to praise them. Is that not true?
To blame, so psychologically attractive,
like our brains
to blame
yeah, like we're kind of wired, like the blaming feels better than than praising does. Like you'll hear people say that when you're being kind, it sounds fake to them. Do you ever hear people say that? Oh, that makes me really sad when people say that. But like, you're being kind, you're phony. I'm like, I'm not phony. That's what I think. So they're so wired towards the destructive, like the blame.
Yes.
That when they see kind, it rubs them wrong. That's really something.
It's hard to receive and internalize as truth. Yes. And I think as the deliverer, I'm trying to understand that the sentence that you just said too, like psychologically attractive to blame somebody. Are you saying that as like the person who's receiving that? Or,
no,
or
as the person the person who gives it, like, I guess you get a feeling of superiority by blaming somebody for something, right? So that's probably, and then that raises you up to, I'm better than these people. Like, so all the self-doubt you have inside, you can make it go away by pointing to someone who's clearly doing something wrong.
Right. And I would maybe argue that that's like, I'm going to boost my self-esteem by doing this thing. If I'm going to blame somebody else, I'm going to feel better about my thing. Yeah. And then I have this kind of false self-esteem, as opposed to, well, maybe I have it right. Maybe I don't. That's okay. I'm just going to be kind to myself regardless.
Yeah. And listen, this conversation is extra interesting to me because if you're living with diabetes or you're caring for somebody who has it, you are being judged constantly by blood tests and numbers on things and arrows and beeping and
clarity reports.
And just, you can say you're not being judged and you shouldn't take it as judgment. And that's all true, but it's happening. You are being judged constantly, right? You are either doing something right or you're doing something wrong, or you're getting something right and you don't even know how the hell it happened. So you can't even take credit for it, and so that stuff's all happening. I think it's important to know that you're having all these different impacts like that we've been talking about, because you are then going to go have a human interaction with somebody, your children, your husband, your wife, like somebody in your life, somebody online, and you're going to have all these bad feelings that you don't have time to deal with because you're busy trying to keep someone's blood sugar from being dangerous one way or the other. And then, I don't know, I just think that most of the people who come off poorly online, I think if we could grab them one at a time, like I did with that person in my example, you'd find that is not who they are. It is not how they feel. And if you gave them a do-over, they would certainly not say the thing they just said. And I think the only way to slow that down is if everybody understands that we're all in it's a high tension situation taking care of diabetes, like constantly, I
all
feel
the time.
Yeah. You feel like a hostage negotiator constantly. Like everything you do is about to kill somebody if you do it wrong. Like, so I don't know, that's how it makes me feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's why, I know I say it probably almost every episode that we record, but just the significance of taking responsibility where you can, releasing the blame and offering the self-compassion of like, this is really hard to nail it every time.
Yeah.
And we're not going to, and that's okay.
I think you have to treat it like hitting a baseball, honestly, and just go, wow, I got 3 out of the last 10. I'm so good at this. Yeah. I just really that's it. I mean, that's an old saying, right? But you go 3 for 10 through a career, you're in the Hall of Fame. So hitting a baseball is really, really hard to do. And
is that a true? That's a real stat. I did not know that.
Yeah. Hold on. Let's find out the average batting average of a Hall of Fame. Average batting average of a Hall of Famer. Hold on a second. Okay. So the top 3 are like old timey. So they weren't even playing when people were athletic. Okay. Ty Cobb has a lifetime average of 0.366. Rogers Hornsby, 0.358. Joe Jackson, that's shoeless Joe Jackson, 0.356. Ted Williams batted career 0.344. And to find somebody more like here, look, I don't know. If you don't know baseball, you don't know baseball. Tony Gwynn was a pro hitter. He batted 0.338 for his career. He got slightly over 3 hits every 10 times he was at bat. And there are people, big name people here. I'm scrolling down. Like I'm in the top 600 now. Like I'll give you a name that people are just going to know. It's an old name. Roy Campanella. That's a baseball name people know. He batted .276. That's it.
Wow.
So Cal Ripken Jr. is a lifetime .276 batting average. And
0.27.
Yeah. So he got less than 3 hits every 10 times. And he's one of the best shortstops that ever played. And it just, that to me is how, I mean, I know this is overly simplified, but that's how I think about things. Like when you hear me say something and you think I'm joking, I'm like, I set the bar really low. That way I can't even trip over it. Like everything I do, I'm like, again, me succeeding, right? And because you need that momentum to set that next carrot on that next stick and keep going. Like if you bury yourself under a pile of dread the first time you do something, you'll spend your whole life digging yourself out from it. Me, I was like, I can't believe I got dressed today. I'm killing it. Like let's, and I just, there's a way to trick yourself into feeling that way. And then what are you doing? You're faking it till you make it, right? Like that's a real saying for a reason. So you keep, to me, it's setting little goals, succeeding, and moving on. I do it with my kids all the time. I don't even let them know I'm doing it. The other day, I said to my son, I was like, you should set up an IRA for yourself. Right. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, man. I'm like, you got a job now. Like, it won't be a lot of money, but you can put a little money aside every month. And I made sure to tell him, like, you could have a short-term goal of maybe owning a home if you wanted to in the next 10 years or something like that. And you could have a long-term goal about retiring. And I said, and it doesn't need to be a lot. You can put in a little bit, a manageable amount, and you'll get to these things. And he's like, okay. And that's it. So then I set him up with a person to help him set up an IRA. And then he called me and he said, hey, I talked to the guy. And I was like, that's great. Great that you talked to him. I said, what's next? And he said, oh, I got to fill out the paperwork. I was like, oh, let me know when you do that if you need help. And a week later, I got a call. Hey, what does this mean on this form? And I told him, and he goes, good. And he got all done. I was like, great job. And he's like, thanks. I said, hey, I'd like to put some money in it to get you started. And he's like, oh, thank you. And he goes, you know what he said? I'll match whatever you put in up to this much. And I said, well, if that's as much as you can put in, that's as much as I can put in. And now he's on his way. Like there's
That's
many.
so sweet. Yeah. That's so endearing. Oh my gosh.
But I didn't tell you because how terrific I am. I told you because first of all, I wish somebody would have talked to me about money when I was a person, like a young person. And secondly, because that's an example of like 5 or 6 opportunities to put a little tiny carrot out in front of him. He reaches out and grabs it. He feels like he did something. I filled out the paperwork. Yay me. I called the guy. Yay me. Like that kind of stuff. And he feels like he's doing something without having a down payment in a house. Like, right? He thinks he's working towards it. I got to be honest with you. It doesn't matter if he ever gets to it. It matters that he has something to do and that he has something to focus on and that it's positive and that it's achievable. Short term, long term. That's all. I don't want to say I'm a genius, Erika, but there, I just fixed it for you. Just do that.
Well, then he's having this feedback loop, right?
Yeah.
Of I did this thing and I felt good about myself. And that is so important for the overall mental health, right? That he knows he has the capability, the competency, then he feels good for fulfilling that goal. And that's super important that you're, helping shape him in those steps.
But that's a thing you could all do for yourself in little ways all day long. Like if you say, I'm going to put the laundry away and then you don't do it, you made too big of a goal. like you make a smaller thing and reach for that. You'll be surprised how it'll just get you like motivated. It makes you feel like you're doing something. And you are, by the way. You're not really lying to yourself. You are getting something accomplished. But that momentum and that expectation, by the way, that you're going to accomplish things, it builds on itself. And then you don't have to be out in the world constantly comparing yourself to other people just to feel better. You'll actually feel better because you've compared yourself to a thing that you did. And then you're the focus. Then you're George Clooney to you. Does that all make sense? I mean, I feel like I've bundled this up very nicely for everybody, but
it's just that easy.
It's obviously not that easy, but yes, it is, right? Like there's no more to it than that. I mean, the doing it's hard. The understanding what it is not hard. Like, and so I think my point is if you find yourself comparing yourself to people all the time, or if you find yourself blaming other people all the time, you probably just don't feel good about what you're doing. So go back and set these small goals where you can feel better about yourself. Like, don't look at your 12 A1C and when it's not a 6 next time, go, what the hell? Say, I wonder if I could get this to an 11.5. You know what I mean? And work like that. To me, that makes sense. Anyway.
Yeah. Taking a larger goal, breaking it up into smaller chunks. I talk about that a lot. And even just, thinking about like the laundry example or the exercise of like, okay, if folding the laundry and putting away, I feel that is a really challenging task in my household. Yeah. So to say, I'm going to do the socks today, and you're like, yes, I did the socks. And tomorrow you're going to do the shirts. Same thing with any task of saying, I'm just going to set the timer and do it for 5 minutes and you're done. Don't do the treadmill for 30, do it for 5.
I had trouble standing up after my surgery on my foot. So I said to my wife and my daughter, who's home from school right now, if you guys could just fold the laundry, that'd be really great. Right. So they took care of their laundry. They left my laundry folded on my side of the room. And I thought, I can't put this away right now. So I told myself, I'm going to dress out of the pile and I'm going to make that okay for myself this week.
Yes.
So I got dressed out of the pile of clothing like they were in the drawers. And I didn't say to myself, you're a scumbag for not putting these clothes away. I can't believe you're living out of a pile of clothes. I actually said, that's my goal. I'm going to live out of the pile of clothes today because I can't stand up too long because of my foot. And I don't want to torture myself about this. And I know that when I walk into the room, I look at the pile of clothing and I think, just put that away. Like, do that. But instead, I just made it an okay thing. And that was it. And by the way, I still got the podcast done. I got other stuff accomplished this week. And I don't know. It's all here. Listen, I'm going to make this last point and you can wrap up. I don't know if you know who Shohei Ohtani is, but he's arguably the best baseball player that is alive right now playing.
The name's familiar.
Yeah, he's batting .306 right now. Every person in the world who understands baseball would want him on their baseball team. He's astonishingly good. So that's it. Be a 300 batting average. That's what I would do. I'd shoot for that. Be amazing. You get 3 out of 10 things done that you set up every week, then just reset them again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know. And here's a piece of advice from me to anybody else. Make your to-do list flexible. Don't set 1 to 10 and then say to yourself, I can't get to 2 until I do 1. If 3 becomes more important than 1 to you, slide 3 to 1. Just keep moving it around. It goes a long way to not torturing yourself. So anyway, that's all I got.
And may I add on your to-do list, be kind to yourself. Sometimes I encourage people to have your big to-do list, and then on Monday you have fold the laundry, number 1, number 2, be kind to yourself. And then number 2 on Tuesdays, 2 of those things.
Again, a very doable, that's what I'm saying. It's a very doable thing that you can check off your list, make you feel like you accomplished something, and it's good for you on top of that. So yeah, beautiful. That's exactly right. All right, Erika, ErikaForsyth.com, right? What states are you doing virtually right now?
California, Utah, Oregon, and Florida.
In person in California.
In person in California.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
First, I want to thank Erika and remind you to check her out at ErikaForsyth.com. And then I want to thank all of you for listening. And BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode. BetterHelp.com/Juicebox. Save 10% off your first month of therapy when you use my link. I hope you enjoyed our little thought exercise today. I enjoyed having the conversation with Erika. If you want to check out the private Facebook group that we were talking about, it's called Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes. That's pretty much it. Thanks so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. A diabetes diagnosis comes with a lot of new terminology, and that's why I've created the Defining Diabetes series. These are short episodes where Jenny Smith and I go over all of the terms that you're going to hear living with diabetes, and some of them that you might not hear every day. From the very simple bolus up to feet on the floor. Don't know the difference between hypo and hyper? We'll explain it to you. These are short episodes. They are not boring. They're fun. And they're informative. It's not just us reading to you out of the dictionary. We take the time to chat about all of these different words. Maybe you don't know what a Kussmaul respiration is. You will when you're done. Ever heard of glycemic index and load? Haven't? Doesn't matter. You'll know after you listen to the Defining Diabetes series. Now, how do you find it? You go to juiceboxpodcast.com, up top to the menu, and click on Defining Diabetes. You'll be able to listen right there in your browser, or you'll see the full list of the episodes and be able to go into an audio app like Apple Podcasts or Spotify and listen to them at your pace. Download them into your phone and listen when you can. The Defining Diabetes series is made up of 51 short episodes that will fast forward your knowledge of diabetes terminology.